All political thinking for years past has been vitiated in the same way. People can foresee the future only when it coincides with their own wishes, and the most grossly obvious facts can be ignored when they are unwelcome. And that quote comes from George Orwell. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Maxwell Igan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I'll be your host for the next hour. Well, folks, challenging times in the world this week. We've seen the introduction of a new bill by President Obama. And folks, I do like to keep the shows empowering, and I do like to focus mainly on spirituality and mainly on energy. But sometimes things happen right before your eyes that, well, they just simply demand attention. And the actions that have been taken by Obama in the last week most certainly fall into that category. Because this new bill is most definitely something of an eye-opener. And it's a bill that should hopefully cause even the most asleep person to stir from their slumber. Because with the introduction of this new bill, President Obama has effectively declared a global war on freedom. The power that this bill gives the US government is so broad that even US citizens could be swept up by the military, and the military can be used far away from any battlefield, even within the United States itself, and also within any country. In fact, this bill reminds me of the puppet movie that was made a few years ago called Team America, where America decided to view itself as the world police. Because in his ego and in the ego of the American government, these psychopaths actually believe that this bill makes possible the worldwide indefinite detention without charge or trial of any person the United States government deems to be worthy of detention. And this, of course, could be anybody who decides to speak out against the US government. The bill that I'm talking about is the National Defense Authorization Act, which went to the Senate floor on Monday. Now, sections 1031 and 1032 of this bill explicitly authorise the federal government to indefinitely imprison without charge or trial any American citizen and others. Very careful note of the word others, folks. So it refers to American citizens and others, which of course is anybody, can be picked up both inside and outside of the United States. It mandates military detention of civilians who would otherwise be outside of military control, and it transfers to the Department of Defense core prosecutorial, investigative, law enforcement, penal and custodial authority and responsibility that is now held by the Department of Justice. So basically it's transferring these powers from the Department of Justice to the Department of Defense. This is basically the implementation of a military police state that has a global reach. Yes, folks, these psychopaths actually believe that because they wrote these words on a piece of paper and had a fancy ceremony, it gives them the ability to stroll into any country on earth and arrest anybody they like and hold them without charge. What a wonderful world we live in, folks, and with the introduction of this bill, there should be no doubt whatsoever that the Third Reich is still alive and well, and it has a firm control over the United States today. The only real difference is that Hitler just went out and did these things. He didn't pass legislation saying that it was okay for him to do so, he just did it. Whereas Adolf Obama has actually passed legislation which he believes gives him the right to commit these atrocities. Folks, since the Obama regime came to power, Obama has proven himself to be even more corrupt and more totalitarian and inhuman than both George Bush and Dick Cheney combined. He's managed to out-Bush the Bush regime in every conceivable way that he could find to do so. Yes, folks, change was what was desired, and change is what the world has had. Unfortunately, it has been anything but change for the better. It might be good next time a politician says that they're going to bring change to the world that the voters ask him to please specify what type of change he intends that to be. It's really quite amazing, folks, and really does make me wonder how much the American people are prepared to take, and most certainly makes me wonder about the mentality of the American military and the American police force. I mean, I can't believe that people would actually allow their government to pass such corrupt legislation without going and arresting them and removing them from office, because obviously America is facing a very, very serious threat from a group of domestic enemies that have taken a firm control over the United States government. Because the United States of today resembles anything but the spirit of America. In fact, it resembles a regime that has refined the Nazi system into an extremely functional model, and that is now equipped with the technology to quite literally control the entire planet and kill or incarcerate anybody who dares to stand or even speak out against them. And this is exactly the stance the United States government is taking, and unless the people stop the government from what it is doing, this is the direction it intends to take this planet. But it can all still be fixed, folks, because what I see with this bill is the blatant declaration of dictatorship by the Obama regime, and so this of course provides the opportunity that the people need to realise what the problem is and to therefore stand up and address this situation. And folks, I don't know how it could be any more in your face than what this bill is doing. And so the question becomes, will not only the American people, but the people of the world seize this opportunity for change that is now being presented to them and stand up to rectify this situation? Or do they intend to simply roll over on command and allow the extermination of global freedom? That's the thing about freedom, folks. You have to preserve it. It doesn't come naturally. You have to work at it, and you have to stand up for it. You have to preserve it for future generations the way our forefathers preserved it for us. And if each generation fails to do that and fails to live up to their responsibility as the custodians of freedom in the world, then such freedoms will, by matter of course, be summarily removed, as we are seeing with the introduction of this bill. And of course, this bill is being introduced under the guise of protecting the security of the United States. But folks, you've really got to step back and look at the wider picture, because it isn't protecting the security of the United States at all. It is actually removing the security of the United States and protecting the security of the criminal cabal that is currently in charge of the United States government. And you only have to look at the actions of the United States government to see that it has brutal disregard for the needs of the people. As was once said by Pat Schroeder, you measure a government by how few people need help. And when you look at how many people need help within the United States, how many people are in a state of shortage, how many people have had their lives destroyed and their resources and homes stolen from them at the hands of the government, there can be no doubt whatsoever that the biggest problem the United States faces is its government. And now the United States government intends to extrapolate that problem out to the rest of the world, and is openly declaring its intention to do so. And by claiming it has the right to go into any country and arrest any person without charge or trial, is essentially Obama's declaration of war against the freedoms of all people throughout the entire expanse of the globe. And folks, as outrageous as it may seem for Obama to be doing this, or for Congress to be doing this, there is no doubt that it will be accepted by many other countries, because as we all know, it isn't actually the Obama regime that is enacting these type of atrocities, it is the global government. Because America is essentially a puppet government that is basically being run by the United Nations and by the banking cartels that control the United Nations. You see, America is being set up as the bad guys, and that's why they do all this stuff, because they have the military means to do it, which is exactly why America has been set up as the most powerful military nation on earth. So these types of travesties of justice can be set up and blamed on the United States, when really the United States is simply acting as the global police, which is basically what it has been created to be. And there's no need for other nations to implement the same type of legislation, because America will do it for them, and they will simply comply. I mean, we always see similar types of legislation being enacted in most countries in regards to things such as carbon tax, but as far as military control and global police powers goes, they only really need give that to one country, and then that country can stand there as the big evil scapegoat, when really it's acting on behalf of the entire globalist agenda. It's not actually limited to the United States. But one of the really important things that people need to understand when all of these types of legislation are being enacted is that they are presented to the people as a means of keeping the country safe. But the reality is that it's never about keeping the country safe. What it's about is keeping the government safe. And that's what it's about. The only reason Obama would be enacting this type of legislation is to protect the criminal activity of the global governments. It's the same as the planned censorship of the internet. It isn't to protect anyone. It isn't to protect children against porn. I mean, what you'll find is that most of the porn is run by the CIA. Again, problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem so that you will be offended by it and demand that there is change. The internet censorship that is being planned is to prevent people such as myself from speaking out against the government, and for you to be able to hear what's being said. And that's what it's all about. It's about the cabal protecting themselves at the expense of the people. I mean, they take all your rights and freedoms away, and they tell you that they've done it to keep you safe. But then suddenly you're walking around in a police state feeling anything but safe. And so it should be very, very clear that it never has anything to do about the safety of the public. What it's all about is protecting the criminals who run the government. Always, folks, it's always about the same thing. Look at the Schapelle Corby case here. I actually did a radio interview on Sydney Breakfast Radio the other day discussing the Schapelle Corby case. There has been a massive amount of information come out about the drug smuggling that's been going on at Australian airports. And the reason Schapelle Corby is actually in jail in Bali, and has been in jail for around about 7 years now, for a crime that she did not commit. This woman is rotting in an Indonesian jail, and she's rotting there simply to protect the government corruption that exists within Australia. And that shows how far these sociopaths and psychopaths and criminals in government are actually prepared to go. And Schapelle Corby, folks, it could be you, it could be anyone, it could be anybody who has simply taken a holiday to Bali, could very, very easily find themselves in the same position as Schapelle Corby. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Schapelle Corby case, there is a site called the Expendable Project, and you can find that at expendable.tv. I recommend you go there and have a look at the information regarding the incarceration of this woman. And just remember that this could very well be you. And try to spread the information and get it out on as many networks as possible. And let's see if we can make this go viral and create a bit of public awareness. Because the Schapelle Corby case really is a grand expose of government corruption. And the fact that it's happening here in Australia really does speak volumes, because Australia is supposed to be a free country. And if this type of thing can happen in Australia, then it can happen anywhere, and it is happening everywhere.